Okay, and so recapping our mnemonics from this class, we start off by talking about the scatter plot, which there's just so much data these days that it's truthfully, it works well in the sense that you can generally see a trend or not, but it's hard to really tell how much data is supporting any given point of a trend or pattern. And that can be really helpful in really understanding how worthy something is of investigating. So I wouldn't say I use the scatter plot a lot, but it's kind of the classic plots. That's where we started. There's a few little options that we can change in it, but there are much better options in Seaborn for if you have more than 1,000 rows, that can make a better option. Okay. Next one that we discussed was the regplot, which is one of the better options than just the scatter plot by itself. It adds the regression line to the scatter plot, and it generally allows you to see the general direction. It also gives you a confidence interval to see how confident we would be in that position of the regression line. And from there we went to the KDE, the kernel density plot. And the KDE plot is great. It kind of looks like the rings of the trees of a tree, but here it really shows specifically where the density of our plot or our bivariate relationship is. And because of its simplicity, it works really well as a way to inspect the bivariate relationships by a category, changing the hue by a category you have in your data set. And it can be really, really helpful because of its simplicity. We can add a little bit more details without it becoming too overly cluttery as we go through it. Okay. We then talked about the joint plot, which really allows us to examine the convergence of two variables. And it's really, I would say, the modern day scatter plot, your kind of go-to option instead of the scatter plot. It plots the the univariate relationship on each axis, which allows us to even using the scatter plot in the center allows us to really understand where the density of our data is. We can also use the hex bin on this one, which is a really beautiful plot, as well as even putting the KDE plot in this. Okay, so we have the flexibility, and we can change both the univariate and the joint square plot independently as well, which would be fun, and we'll see that in our notebook today. Okay, we also discussed the heatmap plot, which shows the kind of where the activity of our variables are. We put the correlation matrix in that and really highlight where the positives and negatives correlations are very easily in this plot, and so it works really well in that sense. Okay. We also discussed the pairplot, which allows us to very quickly visualize and see all of the bivariate relationships in our data and understand which ones would be worthy to inspect a little bit more, because the truth is there's just so many. Deciding which ones are worth investigating a little bit more can take a little bit of time. Okay. We discussed from the pair plot, we discussed the pair grid, which allows us even more customization on the pair plot. But a really cool thing that I like to do is doing the regression on one corner, and then on the upper corner doing maybe the residual plot. So kind of two sides of the regression line you can see very quickly and easily, and it highlights really where you might actually have some patterns that you weren't able to see with another way. Really seeing that regression line contrasted with the other side of the regression line, where the errors are, can be very helpful in understanding, what's worthy to inspect a little bit more. What bivariate relationship am I curious about? Would I like to do more? Okay. We discussed the rel plot, so understanding that it's made to understand the relationships in our data. And then we discussed the LM plot, which is made to understand this is the linear model plot. It's made to understand the lines, the linear relationships in our data. And they're both figure level plots, the rel plot and the LM plot. And so we can separate, do a few plots dividing the rows by the categories and columns by the categories, and then even change the hue color so you can get really deep into how subcategories are affected by their categories. Okay, and really how this affects the linear relationship on one side and how it affects the just relationships on the other side. Okay, so there's really allows you can do a lot of the same things in both of them, but the regplot focuses on understanding relationships, and the linear model focuses on understanding the linear relationships. Okay. We also discussed the diverging plot and the light palette. And so what this is the diverging palette will allow us to highlight positive and negative relationships. It's nice to kind of tailor the colors for your work situation, but just even using the colors to make it easier for us to see the difference in the positive and negative relationships can be really valuable. Okay. The light plot is more used when you have just one magnitude of values, and it would just be good to highlight the ascending values of those versus positive and negative. Okay. Okay, so we talked about many mnemonics today, so, logical, different colors that we connected to, and so we had word associations. We finished this off today. I talked a lot about in 3D spaces, just to kind of, when I was discussing a plot, to kind of really allow our brains to more easily remember those 3D spaces. Okay. So one of the ways that we'll recall this is review this in the next class, but a really good thing for you would be to review the presentation that I went through and just make sure, there was a lot of detail that I didn't discuss, all the notes that I had. And so it'd be good for you to go back through and read the notes of when to use and when not to use each and every plot. Okay. So thank you for joining me on the presentation, and I'll see you in the Python notebook.